Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. We are called to be very, very generous as believers. Here in this next section of Matthew on the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to be taking a look at three different areas that are sometimes abused and we need to take great care in. That's the area in our giving or being generous. Also in the area of our praying, and also in the area of fasting. And so the Lord is going to direct our attention to these three areas. And I wanted to highlight this by saying it's funny. You know, Christians are very generous people, but we don't advertise that. We don't make a big deal of it. We just do it because the Lord has asked us to be generous. He himself was generous. God came and he gave his only begotten son. And so we see him being generous, and so we want to be generous too. But it's interesting, you know, the politicians are always saying how boastful and prideful they are in being so generous. But truly, you know, when you look at their giving record, they give maybe 1% or a half of 1%, and they have no idea that Christians, we give 10% and even more. And so we want to be careful concerning these things. Last night we had a Bible study from the book of James, and he says if a person is truly religious, then he will take care of widows and he will take care of orphans. And it's interesting because this is the responsibility of the church. This is what the Lord has called us to. He wants us to be generous. It's not the responsibility of the government or some type of a nonprofit corporation. He wants us as individuals to be generous just like he is generous. So I want to read to you from Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, our devotional time for this morning. Jesus said, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them." And so that's what we don't want to do. We want to be charitable, but you know what? We're not to broadcast it. We're not to highlight it. We're not to make other people think that we are generous people. And see, that's the problem in the good things that we do for the Lord and our good deeds. We can mistakenly, sometimes unwittingly, draw attention to ourselves in doing our good deeds, and the Lord does not want us to do that. He wants us to give him only all the glory and the honor. And so we're not to do our charitable deeds to be seen by men. He says, otherwise you have no reward from your Father in heaven. When you do your charitable deeds to be seen by men, God knows your heart. He knows what's happening inside. And that will be the reward that you get, the acknowledgement and accolades that men can give you. But it's interesting here, the Lord mentions 3 times that we will be rewarded in heaven for our good deeds and for our generosity. And so wouldn't it be much better to store up treasures in heaven rather than to have men think highly of us here? Our applause should be an applause of heaven, not from men. In verse 2 it says, "Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward." In chapter 23 of the book of Matthew, when we get there in a few months, we're going to be taking a look at the scribes and the Pharisees, how Jesus rebukes them. He calls them hypocrites. And this is what they were doing. They wanted to sit in the best seats and make people think that they were very godly and saints and religious people. And the Lord saying, we need to take care that we do not do this. They have received their rewards. And while we do our things in secret, we know that we'll be rewarded and recompensed by the Lord in heaven. In verse 3, it says, but when you do a charitable deed, and so again, we're expected to do charitable deeds, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And again, the Lord wants us to He wants us to do things in secret. He says that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. And so he says, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Of course, you can't. You can't do that. But Jesus is saying you can do things in such a secretive manner that no one else is seeing, no one else is observing. And sometimes people see our generosity. Some people see our good deeds. And what we always want to do, as Jesus said earlier in the Sermon on the Mount, is that when they see our good deeds, may they glorify God who is in heaven. And so we don't want to bring the attention and glory to ourselves. We want to glorify him only. I have one more verse that I want to share to you from Luke chapter 21, verses 1 through 4. A widow who was very poor, and I want you to see what she gave and how the Lord recognized that. It says in verse 1 of Luke 21, and Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury. This is what they were doing. They were sounding trumpets. They were making a show of their giving. And I've seen this. I'm thinking of a man, a newscaster in the States who every once in a while he tells people that he gives money to help people in need. And he's almost very boastful and pride about it, trying to be humble, but why does he even mention that? And so this is what people do, is they want to let people know that they're being generous. And Jesus saw a certain poor widow putting in 2 mites. So he said, truly I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all of those out of their abundance have put in offerings to God, but she put it out of her poverty in all the livelihood that she had. In other words, she didn't have much to live on. What she did have, she generously and freely gave to the Lord. Her sacrifice was greater than the rich and the wealthy. Even though she gave little, she was blessed and recognized of the Lord because she gave out of her poverty. And so may you glorify the Lord today in your giving, in your generosity, in your stewardship, in your tithes and your offerings. Allow the Lord to use you because we are generous people. May you have a great day. And I'd like to ask if you would pray for Pilar. She'll be traveling today. Her father is not doing well in Mexico. And we have a challenge here in Cajamarca because there's a strike and they're not letting people on the streets with their vehicles. We may have a challenge getting her to the airport. So if you could pray this morning specifically for that the Lord would open that door, we would be so grateful. God bless you. Have a great day. We will see you tomorrow morning at the same time. Shalom.